The weather has been dreadful. For the last 2 days there have been blizzards sweeping down this valley and across the summit, winds up to 100 miles an hour. A lot of the equipment has already been damaged. This particular tent, which is the radio tent at the midpoint, is already beginning to blow apart, and when we go off the air from this broadcast, we'll be having to replace it. At the summit itself, of course, things have been that much worse. People have been crawling around on their hands and knees trying to put the equipment together. I believe we can get pictures and sound from the summit. We've had pictures for the very first time from the summit of Ben Nevis this morning. We had some trouble with our radio links a moment ago, but I think we can now talk to Ian McNaught-Davis, who's on the summit. Mac, can you hear me?
Well, I can hear you, Eric, and this is the summit of Ben Nevis in the middle of winter, and as you can imagine, it's cold, it's misty, and it's extremely windy. My feet are at the level of the summit of the tents, which are almost completely buried. Conditions are quite appalling, and I have with me here Hamish McInnes, who's lived for the last 20 years in Glencoe and probably knows Ben Nevis and all its moods as well as anybody. Hamish, what do you think of the conditions at the moment?
Well, they're not very good for an outside broadcast, that's for sure, but it's not particularly cold, and basically it's a reasonable day for Ben Nevis, but we could do with more visibility, certainly.
Not particularly cold means about -5 degrees centigrade, so I guess that's not too bad. How dangerous is it, do you think, at the moment?
Well, the conditions in the northeast face down and behind us here are very critical just now. For the last few days we're having a heavy snowfall, which has been blowing a very large deposit of snow from the summit down into the gullies, filling the gullies. And the snow in some places is probably 50, 60 feet deep in places in the gullies. And at the moment we've got a fair danger from slab avalanches. It's not a good place to be down there at the moment. I wouldn't like to be there.
What about getting the cameras in position? Is it at all feasible to get those cameras in position so we could see the climb even if the mist cleared?
Well, we've got the two summit cameras, the two main summit cameras we've got more or less established here. It won't take very long, but we've got to get down the climbs. We've got to go down onto Gardaloo Butters with two of the cameras. The one's about 400 feet down. It's very steep there, of course. I've already cut out a ledge on one of the ice pitches for one camera, and the other ledge above's still got to be cut out. But it really is quite a difficult job to do that. Until the conditions get a bit better, we can't really do it. I'm afraid it'll be tomorrow morning before we can really get started on that.
I noticed you've got a very nice little blood stain up over your eye. How did you get that?
Well, I was going down the path yesterday and a stone came down. There's a very high wind yesterday, tremendous wind here, and visibility was about 3 feet yesterday. It was one of the worst days I saw in Ben Nevis. And when I got down onto the safe path, a stone came hurtling down the hillside and hit me on the head and my legs. So.
Well, if it's as dangerous as that on the path, you know, on the climbs, it could be even more dangerous.
Well, I think so, yes. I think it could be quite dangerous lower down. But the steeper climbs actually are not so bad. Gardaloo Butters, for example, the snow runs off these climbs and it's not quite so dangerous there.
Uh-huh. Would you advise them to do the climb today or attempt it?
Oh, yes, it wouldn't be any problem doing the climb today because it's fairly steep. But the easier gullies are much more dangerous. There's a bigger accumulation of snow there.
Hamish, I love your understatement. There's no problem doing the climb. These are two of the hardest ice climbs in Scotland in terrible conditions. It's not exactly a picnic.
No, it's not a picnic, but the hike was safe anyway.
OK, Eric, I'll hand it back to you into the sunny, warm climbs of the Alta Vulin.
Right, Mac. Well, it's a joy to see conditions have improved somewhat on the summit. I know yesterday, when we were trying to look at pictures from the camera, we could see nothing but white, a complete whiteout up there with 100-mile-an-hour winds. We've got about 90% of the technical equipment in position now. That final 10%, we just can't get up through this mist to have things rigged. As Hamish explained a moment ago, cutting the camera platforms is another problem. And so we're going to have to call the climb off this afternoon. We're still very hopeful we can do it tomorrow. The climbers, Joe Brown, Betsy Brantley, and with me now, Captain David Nichols from the Royal Marines and Murray Hamilton. What are the conditions like up there on the climbs that you're hoping to do?
Well, I think it's quite difficult to tell exactly what they're like at the moment, but the last time that we had a look at the conditions on Psychedelic Wall, which is the climb we're hoping to do, some 600 feet, the ice and the snow on there was pretty rotten. That means that when we actually go and climb, the crampons and the ice axes that we put into the ice will not be very secure. They'll be pulling through, so it'll be necessary to take it very carefully and ensure that we look around for little rock flakes or rock cracks where we can fit the ice axe into, or the ice axe behind, or look around for a little patch of ice or a patch of frozen turf, which do appear in some of the cracks, where we can put an ice axe in and use the ice axes for balance. As far as the feet are concerned, we'll be using those to really balance up with and gently pad up with the feet, using the ice axes more for balance. There are a number of steep walls there, and on the steep walls we'll be using the rock for handholds.
Well, Murray, we can't see the climb that you're going to do. The mist's right down 1,000 feet below the top of the mountain. What is the climb like that you're doing?
Well, normally it's quite an icy route, but at the moment, well, we haven't seen it for a couple of days, but when we did last see it, it was actually quite a snowy, there was a lot of powder snow on the route, and it really wasn't in good condition.
The difficulty on the climbs up there that yourself and Joe and Murray and Betsy are going to do is one thing, but Hamish before mentioned the amount of snow that has piled off this northeast face into the gullies. There have been avalanches in the last fortnight. 5 people have been killed off this northeast face. Does that mean that the conditions are just too bad to be able to do climbing on this face?
No, I wouldn't say that they're too bad to do climbing on the face. All I would say is that avalanches, as you rightly said, occur here regularly, and when the gullies fill up with snow, as they do during the storms, and the snow is blown off the summit and then they fall into the gullies fill up, and they're loaded with snow. Now that snow's not going to stay up there, it's going to come down. Now when it's actually going to fall down, nobody can tell, though one can assess that by the conditions as they occur during the day. In other words, if one comes up today, for instance, and the gullies are full of snow, and you go up there, then one is risking oneself by walking actually in a gully which is full of snow.
Either going for that rather than the face climbs and the buttress climb.
It's actually the style of climbing that the modern equipment has made particularly easy and pleasant. People of fairly average ability can climb gullies which are good natural lines to climb, and climb them quickly, and that's what people want to do, climb quickly and move quickly. Otherwise it's a lot of standing around getting cold.
So if 90% of the equipment in, we've still got some cables, some camera equipment to drag up the mountain. We're going to be working here for the rest of the afternoon, and we'll be back on BBC 2 at 5 minutes to 2 to give you a progress report.
Okay, and
well, late this morning, the weather drove us down from the mountain. And for the second day running, we've had to abandon our attempts to bring live coverage of an ice climb and ski run on the northeast face. Down here, 4 miles from the summit, it's windy and it's cold. But overnight on the summit, the conditions have been appalling. There was driving torrential rain, followed by freezing blizzards. And late this morning, our safety officer, Hamish McInnes, decided that we had to pull our engineers and the climbers down from the summit. What was the trip down like, Hamish?
It was quite dramatic, really. We had everybody on, 2 ropes, so we had something like 15 people in a long line coming down, and luckily we ordered some canes, and some of our lads marked it, but otherwise there was trouble even with the compass coming down. It was quite bad, actually, coming down today.
What was the surface like?
Well, last night, as you mentioned, it got wet, and that subsequently froze, so the whole top of Ben Nevis was coated in ice, and it was quite difficult getting the people down. Though they had crampons, it was still fairly awkward. But really, that wasn't the problem as far as I was concerned. The problem was exposure. But because of these wet conditions, the crew people were wet last night, and I just couldn't risk them having another night in the summit. And because of the later transmission today, I felt that people's life may be in danger, and it just wasn't worth it. And I've since heard a report from the summit from Sergeant David Lazenby of the Marines up there to say that since we left, some of the tents have collapsed, and they've had to move into another tent in an emergency. So at the present time, conditions are pretty bad in the summit. Though on the climb itself, which is sheltered, it wasn't too bad. I mean, the climbers could have in fact got onto the route all right, but we just couldn't risk the BBC personnel who are in a more exposed situation up above. That's basically what it was.
Well, so when Cox, you were the cameraman on the summit and spent the night up there. What was it like at the worst of the weather?
it was very wet overnight. As Hamish says, we had a great deal of rain. The tent, in fact, which is designed, an Arctic tent designed for snow and ice, is not really very suitable for heavy rain, which we had heavy driving rain throughout the night, which froze towards the early hours of this morning, so that, in fact, the tents were totally covered in ice by the time we finished. And as Hamish says, when we eventually took the decision to come down, it meant that most of the route down was very icy, and that's why we roped everybody up with crampons and ice axes to get down off the hill safely.
Well, did yourself and the Marines who were up there overnight manage to get any sleep?
Oh, yes, and Nevis was up there as well. Yes, we did get some sleep, but it was a somewhat troubled night. But I mean, I feel that we got some live pictures off the top of the mountain last night, which is a tribute to Hamish and his boys and our engineers and cameramen for managing.
And to you for your hard work in the last few days.
I was very pleased we managed it.
I can vouch for that. You did very well up there.
Dave Lazenby and his Marines, as they've been for the last 8 nights, are staying on the summit again tonight. They'll be spending the rest of the afternoon repairing their equipment. Because technically, we've won the battle with the mountain. We've actually had pictures from the top. We've had sound from the top and from the midpoint. And we're still going to hope to record a climb on the northeast face of Ben Nevis. But I'm afraid that, for the moment, the Ben Nevis weather is winning the battle.
Right, and saw a great powder avalanche coming out of Castle Gully. And initially, all I saw was the vast powder cloud. And then as the cloud descended down, I saw that there were something like 16 climbers actually in the gully and caught in this avalanche. And I saw 3 climbers swept down the gully, and they came down, as you can see, into that first snow bay, and then to my horror, they fell 150 feet straight over the vertical rock face that you can see there, and lodged in a snow bay which is halfway up the bottom part of the buttress there. And we dug down into the snow and discovered, tragically, the other 2 climbers down there, some 4 feet under the snow in the debris. Of course, sadly, both of them were dead.
It was a warning from the mountain. The day before we arrived at Ben Nevis, 3 climbers died. In 2 weeks, we planned to transmit coverage of a winter ice climb in a satellite broadcast from the treacherous north face. Britain's highest mountain, deceptively placid in sunshine, has a bad record of winter accidents. Falls from the vertical rock faces, avalanches from a summit that's scoured by more than 250 gales in an average year.
I'm paying for it. I want to be in the picture.
Right, let's get you in there.
7 days to transmission, our climbing team arrived. Jo Brown, the world's greatest rock climber. Actress Betsy Brantley, who only learned to climb a year before.
She's probably stronger than me. If she had this bit of technique, she'd be, she would be leading.
It'd be hard push to be any weaker, wouldn't she?
On the other rope, the quiet men, Murray Hamilton from Edinburgh, Captain David Nichols of the Royal Marines.
Oh, yeah, she said she could do 5 one-arm pull-ups.
I didn't know what they were.
What a beast.
You just look this way this time. Those 2 that got their sleeping bags in them. Roll them down. 20. 9 boxes of rations we'll take on the summit. All right? So those 2 pots of the bags, you fellas, move over there.
To get these 4 climbers onto the north face, more to the point, to get pictures and sound for our live broadcast off the north face, was to involve lifting 3.5 tons of food, supplies and electronic equipment up the mountain. The camps that were needed, organised by Royal Marines of 4-5 Commando. Heavy lifting with the help of a Royal Navy Sea King helicopter. ...4,406 feet above us, the first of that equipment was beginning to arrive at the snowfield, which was being dug out to build our summit camp. Cameras and generators to be airlifted and unpacked. Within a day, we hope to have a settlement of Arctic tents here, roped down to withstand winds of 100 miles an hour. They'd be protection for our engineers and Sergeant Dave Lazenby's Marines.
The first thing to do is get this tent up so we've got some shelter. Each one's got to be dug in like this and then really pegged in and roped down securely. And we'll do each one at a time, rope down securely, just in case the weather turns nasty tonight.
Are we taking any bets on whether they're going to stay up?
Not at this stage, no.
The climbing operations were being planned by that guru of Scottish mountaineering, Hamish McInnes, a whiskery greyhound of a man that reporters always wanted to ask why it was worth doing an ice climb on the North Face.
Well, when just looking around, I just don't really know why, but I think basically we're looking for something more difficult and more unusual to do, and this thing has never been done before. Nothing like this has ever been done before, because here we're in the path of the North Atlantic hurricanes. I know today that's not the case, but it can change in a very short period of time, and it can be real white hell up here. So the actual chances of doing this climb is probably only 50-50, but I feel that you've really got to try something different, attempt to do something better all the time, and let's hope this is going to be better.
Okay, let's go.
The Marines building our mid-camp at the foot of the North Face certainly hoped so. Snow was already swirling and gusting around this bowl in the mountain.
That's it.
But at least on this winter campaign, the weather was the only enemy.
As far as an operation goes, it's not too bad. It's something to be taken seriously. As we've seen already, that 10-man tent completely wrecked the top of the pole. It was just out in the wind. I mean, we've got a mild wind blowing here, and it's ruined the top of the tent. So we've got to start again.
This is good because it's sort of like Dave says, we're relaxed and we can sort of take it all in, whereas we're not sort of thinking about the sort of military side of it, which is
yeah, everything becomes that much harder when you take the tactical aspect into it.
Carrying weapons, stuff like that. When you've got to think about, you know, whether an enemy's going to come over a ridge, round a ridge or whatever, then tactically sight trenches and dig trenches and stuff like that.
There's a movement thing as well, isn't it?
It's a lot of mucking about, yeah.
3 months later, these same men were to be found mucking about in the freezing mud of a Falklands hillside. At the building site around the mid-camp, the Glencoe Mafia was hard at work too. 8 world-class mountaineers, the Sherpas, who were to guide us on and off the mountain. How Ian Nicholson and Ronnie Roger were going to look after BBC producers and commentators who'd done their high-altitude training on beer and 40 fags a day, we didn't dare think.
Not by depriving you of your beer and cigarettes and keeping a smile on your face and making sure you don't go too near any edges or make any silly moves. We've not got eyes in the back of our heads, but we'll watch us very carefully and assure you that we are capable of looking after you.
In the days that followed, we were going to need every ounce of the skill that the Glencoe Sherpas had discovered in their long contests with this mountain. The success of the airlift of technical supplies depended too on a knowledge of flying conditions and fast-changing weather in these mountains that helicopter pilot John Poland had learnt over the years.
Particularly when we drop you off now, don't walk uphill into the road, just stay by the aircraft till I've gone. And don't get, also what was happening regularly yesterday was people getting in without asking to get in. If you get in when I'm not ready, you'll unbounce the aircraft, and it's quite a good way of crashing it, which will spoil the whole day, really. So if we try and do that, we'll be all right.
Each day they flew first light to dusk, taking personnel and supplies through holes in the weather to mid-camp and summit. If anything went wrong, if we had to abandon the project, it would be the helicopters that would rescue our advance parties from the mountain.
Yeah, if they stick at all, Betsy, just lever them up. That's the idea. Just lever them up and then put them in again, yeah.
It's very much applied mathematics, isn't it?
Yeah, and a bit of strength as well.
The climbers were beginning their preparations. Betsy, until 18 months ago, had done nothing more strenuous than fell walking in her native North Carolina. She had to learn to climb to play opposite Sean Connery in Fred Zinnemann's alpine adventure film, 5 Days in Summer.
Oh, God!
I think you're getting a bit tired, actually.
Here she was to attempt to scale 1,000 feet of one of the most severe ice climbs in the world.
I think to begin with, you know, you get rather nervous and you use a lot of mental energy.
Yeah.
Once you get you, but it is always strenuous. It's always sore in the calf muscles and the steep stuff. And when you go over the edge, you've got to be equally careful, you know, because it's often quite a dangerous point, that, because you tend to relax.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy that, then?
I did, actually.
Yeah, it's quite good fun, isn't it? It's a bit strenuous if it's much longer than that.
Yeah, yeah.
Ahead of Betsy would be the experienced hands and feet of Joe Brown, lowering himself off the summit to plan the routes on Psychedelic Wall and Gardyloo Buttress.
From Boys Point. There's Joe coming down now.
What?
Are we on the right?
Yes, bang on. Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe. When you go down, keep to the left a bit, because if the further left you are, the better it is for the cameras here. On that side.
Well, what we're doing is, because the conditions are a bit short on ice, we're just going down to make sure that there are no impossible bits where there's no ice at all. And if that's so, then we'll need to look for a different climb to do. And rather than just leave it till the day and then find out that it's not possible to do the route, we've got to do a little bit of work in advance so that we have a good idea that the route's possible, and also that the cameras will be able to see us. And that's basically all we're doing now.
Making it look like an afternoon walk on the wild side of the mountain. Do you ever get frightened when you're climbing?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I think everybody does. I mean, I'm inexperienced enough to get more frightened than anybody else that's going to be on this climb, I should think. But I think even they get scared when they're halfway up and realise they can't turn back, and if things are problematic going forward, they've just got to stop.
But even if you feel reasonably safe, isn't all this really just a stunt? And people have said, here you are, a Hollywood actress, you're going to shin up the North Face. Surely it's part of nothing more than a publicity exercise.
That can't be the case, in that they wouldn't let me up there if they didn't think that there was even a possibility of me getting to the top. I think because they are so expert, people sitting watching television don't always know how difficult it is, because they can make it look so easy. Whereas somebody that is inexperienced but gullible, like me, is going to show them that it's a question of applying yourself and having some luck too.
The press was already saying that this whole venture was irresponsible. TV producers forcing innocent climbers to risk their necks so that people sitting at home in their armchairs could have a bit of excitement, that sort of thing. But did climber Murray Hamilton see it like that?
No, I don't think so. You always have your own, you've got your own thresholds, and I don't think that a camera pointing at me is going to change my thresholds as to what I'm going to try. Certainly, I hope not. I'd be a bit disappointed in Dave if he was any different, really.
Hamish here. I was just wanting to have a word with him about the conditions there. Perhaps you can tell me anyhow. Over.
The weather was turning for the worse, but through the rain and the mist, the engineers got the first crackling radio communications from the summit, and the rest of us, at the foot of the North Face, warmed to Marine's boil-in-the-bag venison stew.
Oh, that's great anyway. Oh, we'll be in touch in the morning. I hope the wind's going to go down a bit. Cheerio just now.
At times, you could see Hamish McInnes narrow his eyes a little more. He was beginning to get worried.
This is one of them.
The highest newspaper and grocery round in Britain on the morning of the second day.
Oh, just a job, yeah.
A few days, and we'll bring some more up tomorrow.
We needed them batteries for our razors, you know.
Yeah. You're having a good time then?
Oh, great, yeah, can't be bad. I'll tell you something, mate, if the coupon comes up tonight, you might not find us here tomorrow. Watch the eggs. Oh, nice and scrambled. You don't fancy the liver and onions? No, liver and onions are really crap. See, we were using them out in the Himalayas and it never came back right at all, you know. It's like eating bits of your boots.
See, the last time he dropped a huge big crate and bust the whole lot.
Everyone,
There, take care.
There you are.
A mile below, the weather was passable. The mobile transmitting station had been set up in a field behind Fort William rubbish dump. Signals from the mountain would be relayed to London through Roy Carpenter's satellite ground station.
When all the cameras have gone through the main scanner, you've mixed the program, it's fed across to the ground station, and then it's fired 22,000 miles up to the satellite, the orbital test satellite, and received at Goonhilly. And then from Goonhilly it comes back up to London.
When you first heard that we were proposing to do a live OB on Ben Nevis, what was your reaction?
I thought it was a tremendous challenge.
John Poland and his partner Dave Clem were now flying into the blizzard. Ghosts of helicopters and a cloud of snow and mist that rolled down in minutes from the head of Ben Nevis and Carn Jarrett. The summit tents, designed for Arctic warfare, were having difficulty coping with Ben Nevis weather, and the Marines and engineers were having to resort to the skills of the Eskimo to get shelter. Even at the midpoint, tents built to house delicate electronic equipment were beginning to blow apart.
Just building up a wall here just to protect the tent a bit. Wind's not very strong today. It's gusting up perhaps to 20 knots, but I'm sure it can go up a lot higher than this.
The next day, it did. There was suddenly a new edge to the black comedy of the helicopter pilot's early morning ritual.
Well, what do you want? Heads? Toss for it. All right, heads I go, tails you go.
No. Oh.
Me. Oh. Yeah. I think I lost the toss, Dave, actually. Why? Well, I've got to go and fly as well because Hamish wants a recce in the corrie there. Doesn't want to come himself there.
I've done a lot of these recce flights, and the first flight in the morning can be quite frightening, I've discovered, when the conditions are like this, because I phoned up the Met Office earlier this morning, and when I suggested we might be flying here, he was a bit taken aback. He said there's a lot of turbulence, and there really is. You can see the clouds.
I think it's snowing up there.
Dave?
Yep?
What is your advice to the young pilot who comes to you and says, I want to fly a helicopter in the Scottish mountains in winter?
Time to go and play cricket in a sunny place. I don't know. It just amazes me how long we can survive. If you think of the number of heart-stopping instances you get in winter, the proportion between the winter ones and the summer ones is much higher, mainly because of the climatic conditions, you know, gales, rain, snow, icing, bad viz. Mainly the turbulence. You'll feel it as we come up over this ridge. There's one there. The great lurches you get. And it's this horrible sensation as you go sinking towards the ground with the lever up under your armpit, and you're just waiting for it. Will we stop or will we crash into the thing? I still haven't managed to get over that, even after 17 years.
Nevis reckons that this is the most dangerous valley in Scotland to fly in. Would you agree with it?
Well, I think he's right. Now today we've got, at the most, 20 knots of wind from the southwest. And you can feel it. We're being thrown around like a cork in a bucket. There's no rhyme or reason to what happens in this glen. It makes its own weather. You can even get flat, calm days in winter. There's winds swirling round and round in this glen like nothing on earth. Well, you feel this lot here. So it makes life interesting, I suppose.
At times, too, we had a short, sharp reminder that life's hard to hang on to if you're reckless or unlucky in these mountains. On the next flight, Dave Clem spotted the bodies of 2 amateur climbers below the north face. What looked like 2 crumpled orange ground sheets in the snow brought the death toll to 5 in a week.
The worst job, Mike, is not taking the dead bodies down. We've got quite hardened to that over the years. It's telling their friends down at the roadside they're dead, you know. Sometimes it can be quite emotional business. I don't like that part at all.
And it's never put you off climbing yourselves?
I think it makes you more wary, but doesn't put you off climbing, no.
Well, it's all very well to advise people about what they should do, but when it really comes to the crunch, everyone learns for themselves, and you can get a lot of good advice and good tips from other people. But just thinking of the things I did when I was young, I fell 300 feet on Nevis when I was about 20, 22, and I think Hamish has had big falls, and if you're unlucky, you just don't get away with them.
Yesterday, for instance, when they said they found those bodies, everybody was very sick about it. But if you do get sort of over upset about people dying, we both had friends that have died, and you are upset, but if it affects you that much, then people do jack it in, don't they?
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing, but it's not the end of the world. Well, it is for them, but it's not for you, and if you do start thinking that much and getting all morbid over it, then you might as well let it pack it in.
Simon to Mike there. Come in, Mike, over.
Simon, we've got an injured climber up here at the midpoint. He's not too badly injured, possibly just a bit of shock. I'm going to ask, can you ask John on your radio on the next trip, not this one, on the next trip? We'll have him up there and we'll take him down, and then one of you can drive him into the hospital for a check, over.
Just checking it.
Another injured climber, but this time with the luck of Joe Brown. Still walking, carrying his pack, he's just fallen 200 feet. The one stumbling to keep up with him is the producer. The next day, it seemed, our prayers had been answered. The weather lifted. The summit looked as sweet and innocent as an iced cake. The Marines could change shifts. We could fly in extra food. And the engineers set about repairing the damage done by the gales and deep freeze of the previous 72 hours. Whilst all this was going on, we were joined by a man that even daredevil Joe Brown thought was mad. A quiet, unassuming Frenchman.
My name is Jean-Franck Charlet. I'm French. I'm living in Chamonix. I'm 29 years old. I was married with a baby. He's 4 years old. And my job in Chamonix is guiding people in the mountain. and skiing with them. And my father, my grandfather, the father of my grandfather were a guide. And
Jean-Franc Charlet from Chamonix has told us he intends to ski down the north face of Ben Nevis.
No, I wouldn't ski that at all. I wouldn't dream about it.
Just nightmares about it,
just
maybe.
daft, aye, that's about it,
But the snow condition looks all right. So that's the main problem, you know, the snow condition. Because if it's icy, if the snow is not very good, I think you have better not to go, you know. But it snows a little bit. It's not too much icy, and I think we'll be all right.
4,500 feet up, he jumps off the mountain. Over the top to land on a 65-degree slope of ice and snow. It's a route known as the Good Friday Climb. Going up, it's rated as a severe ice climb, only to be tackled by experienced mountaineers. He's skiing down it. Angling skis into the snow, watching out for what's known as slab in the business. It means uncomfortably that the whole slice of snow that's holding you to the mountain can break off beneath you and take you with it. Skiing to the edge of vertical drops, the ground falling away 250 or 300 feet, fixing ropes to shin down to the next snowfield. It's said that people who go up mountains are called mountaineers. People who come down are survivors. And professional survivors are called guides. Jean-Franc Charlet has the smiling nonchalance of the breed, always just 2 ski edges away from a drop to certain death.
I would like to test the slope before. Be careful here. Just worry about slab.
But however reckless he may appear to be, Jean-Franc is actually a very careful man who has every intention of seeing his baby son grow up to be the 6th generation of Chamonix guides.
Quite good here. Very nice. Yeah! Yahoo! Yahoo! It's steep enough. Looks nice. No danger of slab. Possible to ski down there.
High above him, the gullies are bursting with snow. If there was the slightest thaw, every one of the wedges in the rock face could avalanche onto these lower slopes.
That looks very nice, indeed. Can't imagine such a skiing in Scotland. Better than in Chamonix. Absolutely fantastic snow.
Jean-François Charlet made it. The thaw that would bring the danger of avalanche didn't come.
That's not so good here.
Instead, the prevailing Atlantic winds blew in another storm. The temperature and the cloud base dropped. We knew then it was going to be a race to get the rest of the equipment to the top. Ice had again started to form under the grey blanket that fell over 2,000 feet of the mountain. Freezing mist driving across the summit camp, tearing guy ropes under the strain and the weight of ice, taking each sortie with Dave Clem's helicopter nearer to the limit.
We were lucky. We just got one break as we came in. Cleared off. There's about 2 feet of fresh snow. Looks like a buried Everest expedition at the moment. But as we came in and landed, the snow spilled round, then the cloud rolled in, and the whole of the bubble iced up, and the blaze iced up, just like that. I couldn't see what was going on. So, I didn't know whether to stay there, shut down, clean everything off, or what. But then it cleared slightly, so I just set 100% torque and watched the instruments and climbed up on top and came down. I don't know.
The storm, a mile high, was so strong now that everyone going onto the mountain had to wear crampons to have the slightest chance of a foothold on the new sheets of surface ice. From now on, groups of engineers and climbers would be roped together. It wasn't a good time for my fellow commentator Ian McNaught-Davis to arrive with a gammy leg.
I'm teaching my body to overcome pain by training it by lots of damage. If anything's worth doing, it's worth doing to excess, and I've done it to my leg.
This is a record, you know, and this is the only time that they've had to call the Mountain Rescue Arctic bloody crew on the mountain.
Well, you know, I'll do anything to get in the Guinness Book of Records, even if it's something crass like that.
Equipment assembled at base camp and at the middle of the mountain had to be positioned at the top. The scaffold frames that would carry our transmission aerials manoeuvred and secured just a foot from the edge, one small step away from a drop of 1,000 feet. Time and again, they flew those 3-mile round trips, trying any possible way to get close to the summit. Then one flight went wrong.
It's a bit windy there, or I thought it was a bit windy. But the second trip, we took 2 climbers and 1 bloke, landed on the pad, and while we were unloading the stuff from the back, we could see camera 5 up the glen. And the spindrift, the wall of spindrift came over camera 5, obliterated the tent, and you could see it go along the east ridge and then turn down and come down the east ridge straight at the helicopter pad, and it hit the side of the helicopter. Must have been a gust in excess of 70, 80 knots, and actually physically turned the helicopter on the ground and graunched all the snowshoes on the rocks. Ronnie fell over,
So at that point, we decided to give up flying operations into the glen for the day. Well, until the weather eases, which is very unlikely. So that's that.
One day to transmission and 2 days behind schedule, even cutting equipment to the bare minimum to get some sort of broadcast on the air.
You'll soon be able to tell how bad it is. Because with that sort of forecast, you just don't want to take inexperienced people out even an easy route, you know.
And check out camera 5. It's going to be too strong for laying cable, I fancy, John, isn't it?
I would certainly be too blustery for it.
We're worse even in Coriolis in that area.
Well, we'll just consolidate today as much as we can.
It's a good word.
Yeah.
Meaningless.
It was impossible for the helicopters to get anywhere near the top of the mountain. All they'd been able to do was leave supplies in marked dumps out in the snow. The climbers and Sherpas, even Betsy, would have to carry it up the last 1,000 feet.
One of the problems is that we've got 4 helicopter loads of equipment partway up the mountain, which is vital to go to the summit. So the only thing we can do is to actually carry it up there, because the helicopter can't fly. So we've got the climbers mustered today to carry up the most vital parts of these loads to the summit so that the engineers can go up later and start rigging. The other problem is that we've got to get the engineers up there, so when we do the journey with the sledges or carrying the stuff in pack frames, we'll then be able to tell if the conditions are suitable to take the engineers up. Because in the drifting snow and a high wind, people can get exhausted very quickly, so we'll have to really assess it very carefully and make sure that they're escorted by some of our climbers as they go up. So we won't really know for another hour or so, you know, whether this is possible. We may get the loads up, we may not get the engineers up, so really it's a big question mark at that present time. Anyway, we better get started.
Right, so what state are you in at the moment?
The crew, already wet and cold, made a determined final push. Helped by the spirit of the 4 climbers, all still bluntly hopeful they'd get a chance to do the routes. If Betsy could keep smiling out in those conditions, there was no excuse for anyone else.
I'm more nervous about the weather. It seems to be the leading lady in this than anything else. Because at this point, we've been through so much that you just want to get a chance to try to do it.
But you're going to climb it anyway, regardless.
Are we? Are we? Oh, yeah. Oh, well, that makes me less nervous. Yeah.
Cut. Right.
I really do want to at this point. He said, cut!
The pack train up the mountain made it. Early next morning, these first ever electronic pictures were beamed from the top of Ben Nevis. Television cameras and sound equipment had never been operated in those conditions before. We heard of microphone engineers boiling equipment in pans of water to thaw it out. One of the cameramen had to be restrained from taking off his anorak and rolling up his sleeves to get on with the job. When the climbers came back from the Marines' camp at the summit, the wind was gusting at 100 miles an hour. The temperatures had dropped to -30.
It's white-out conditions most of the time, so you can't see, and you know, you can't tell whether you can see a yard at times. And conditions like that are very dangerous because you're not sure if you're going to step over a cornice. And it's also blowing like hell, which is very painful. You know, carrying loads in it's desperate because you're just being blown off balance all the time. You're being hit in the face by, you know, spindrift, which really hurts. But apart from that, it was pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. A wee bit unpleasant, really, this morning. There was this stuff coming across, in the form of golf balls, doing about 1,000 miles an hour.
the scene up there, I mean, to me it's something like Ice Station Zebra. Sort of flurry of snow that sort of whips through, and your visibility is down to about 20 feet.
So the viewers should be able to see all that tomorrow, shouldn't
The whole thing is extremely laborious, that sort of thing. I'll try and do something to get this clear if I can.
And now we can actually go live to Ben Nevis and find out exactly what conditions are like and whether the climb is on. And Eric Robson is there. Hello, Eric.
Good morning to you, Noel. The weather has been dreadful. For the last 2 days there have been blizzards sweeping down this valley and across the summit. Winds up to 100 miles an hour. A lot of the equipment has already been damaged. This particular tent, which is the radio tent at the midpoint, is already beginning to blow apart, and when we go off the air from this broadcast, we'll be having to replace it. At the summit itself, of course, things have been that much worse. People have been crawling around on their hands and knees trying to put the equipment together. I believe we can get pictures and sound from the summit. We've had pictures for the very first time from the summit of Ben Nevis this morning. We had some trouble with our radio links a moment ago.
Having achieved those first pictures, we waited. Another camera had yet to be flown to the north face. Cloud was still blocking out the climbs. Engineering manager Jim Maiden couldn't believe it was possible for the weather to keep on getting worse, and he was at ground level.
How they're working up there we don't know, but to survive this and produce pictures off the mountain which have been recorded this morning, and at the same time I'm being blown around here, as I say, at a 65-mile-an-hour wind here at ground level. How they are doing that on the mountain and carrying on with normal work, I just can't, words fail me for the people we've got here. They are absolutely marvellous.
For 2 days we waited and tried each day to do the programme. Then Hamish McInnes called it off, and the producer set about counting the crew off the mountain.
We'll just have to put everything on hold at the moment. John Poland now is going to take off and try and get these people off the summit. Over.
Yes, okay, Mike, but you've got a couple of volunteers here. We're all kitted up.
Yeah, Chris, I appreciate that very much, but it's going to need some more, so we're just going to have to see what sort of state everybody's in when they do get down. Over.
Understood, Mike.
It was a decision no one wanted, but one that Hamish had to make. As our safety officer, he was beginning to have real worries that some of the technicians, even some of the Marines used to Arctic warfare training, were beginning to show signs of exposure. Further delay, at a time when every weather forecast was worse than the one before, could have left the men on the mountain in real danger.
I think Hamish made the right decision, though,
I
to
do,
get the guys
absolutely
off.
right. Now, there was 50-mile-an-hour winds, there was horizontal spindrift mixed with snow. The visibility was about as far as from here to that car, about 20 yards, and it was really very frightening. That, you know, you didn't know where you were. It was very disorientating, and that anybody trying to work under those conditions, you know, after a bad night and wet and all your kit humid and horrid, you know, they wouldn't like it at all.
When it gets to that borderline case, you've got to make a decision, and that's it. It's no, you can't play with people's lives, you know.
It took a week to bring the equipment down, and the storms continued for 2 weeks after that. But then Ben Nevis had given us fair warning.